Hey guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Becca and today I am going to be recommending you some dystopian books. So I'm a really big fan of dystopian and utopian worlds. I know it was really oversaturated like between 2012 and 2015 when The Hunger Games was at its height, both the books and the movie. So there are a lot of dystopian books out there. Some of them did get a lot more fame than others did, but there are also a lot of books out there that do take place in dystopian worlds but aren't necessarily dystopians. There are also utopians, which I often find are actually dystopians but in a seemingly utopian world. I've spoken recently about how it's very possible that I may be starting to like science fiction more than fantasy, and I think that is because I'm a logical person and science fiction and dystopia is all based on things that could possibly happen or take place in worlds that are a lot easier for us to get to grips with because they are set in a version of our own world. So today I'm going to be recommending 5 books to you guys. Some of them are straight up dystopians, one is a utopian, there are a couple. A few of them are set in dystopian worlds even though the dystopian aspect may not be at the forefront of the plot, and I hope this helps you pick your next dystopian read. So when I do these recommendation videos, I do normally include at least one kind of obvious pick, and as you may have guessed from the introduction of this video, my obvious pick this time is The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. Now I'm sure you all know, but in case you don't, The Hunger Games follows a girl called Katniss Everdeen who is from District 12 of this world, and this is set in a dystopian America where the country has been split off into districts with the capital being at its center. The capital is the place where the elite live. They kind of have no troubles, while the people in the districts, most of them live in poverty. The lower numbered they are, the more impoverished they are, 12 being the lowest. And in this world we have the Hunger Games, which is essentially a battle royale. If you play Fortnite or have read or seen battle royale, you will know what that is, where 24 children are placed into an arena. They have to fight to the death. The one that survives will be the winner. Now I absolutely loved this when I first read it. I think this is one of the first books that I read when I joined Goodreads, so I read it maybe around 2014. It was really new and interesting to me at the time. As I said, dystopian was really in its height back then because of these books, so this was like a breath of fresh air. I have since reread this earlier this year and I do still think that it's really good. It's not as well written as I remembered it being. The writing is very straight to the point and it isn't flowery or very descriptive at all, and Katniss is my least favourite character in a book ever. She really annoys me because of some of the decisions and her attitudes in the later books in the series. However, the storyline of this is absolutely fantastic. We have the arena based games, there's also family dynamics, there is a love triangle because this was written in 2008, so it is like quite tropey, but I think in the time that this was written it was really good. If you are nostalgic for it, I would recommend rereading it. It's really fast paced and the plot is excellent. Obviously it has its flaws as the dystopian genre has come a long way since then, but this will still be a staple dystopian for me and I will cherish this story for years to come. Next up we have that utopia I was talking about, and that is Scythe by Neil Shusterman. Of all of the books that I'm recommending today, this is the one that I have read and fallen in love with the most recently, and this is more of a utopian than a dystopian, but like I said before, utopian books tend to actually be dystopians. It's just the rest of society think that they're in a utopian world. So Scythe also takes place in America. It is quite far into the future and humanity has conquered death and pretty much everything. So you can't die of old age, you can't be murdered, you can't die by accident. However, population control is still a thing, and so there is an organization of scythes who are trained to glean people. Now these scythes do have a code of conduct. For example, they can't kill anybody because of personal vendettas, but they very much live on the outskirts of society as they don't really interact with normal daily life. Their purpose is to select people to kill. They're not strictly governed, so scythes can glean really however they see fit. Some of them use old world probabilities, so for example 7% of the population today may die in car accidents, and of that 7%, 2% may be drunk drivers or 17-year-old males, and some scythes will glean based on those statistics. So every 1 in 100 person that they glean may fit that particular profile. Some of them randomly select people, some of them just pick people that they're randomly walking by on the street, but that is how death works in this world. Now we follow two main characters who are apprentice scythes to Scythe Faraday. We have one girl, Citra, and one boy, Rowan. They are inducted into this world of scythedom and they are trying to figure out how they're going to kill people, whether this is something they want, whether gleaning people is something that they can live with, what kind of system they're going to use. Like the Hunger Games, this is written very simplistically, it's very to the point, it's not very descriptive. But the thing I love the most about this particular book is the world. I was eating up every single bit of information that I could about this because the world that Neil Shusterman has created is just so interesting. The scythedom politics fascinated me, and obviously to make this a good story, there is corruption within the scythedom. Not every scythe is good, not every scythe is just, and pretty much everything that happened in here, I just ate it all up. There is a hint of an unnecessary romance in here, but it definitely does not overtake the story. So even if that is something that really annoys you, like it did annoy me when I was reading this, it's definitely very minor and it does not overshadow everything else that's going on in here that is awesome. Next up we have The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. Samantha Shannon is most well known at the minute for Priory of the Orange Tree, but this is a dystopian science fiction that takes place in London in the near future, and in this world psychics exist. There are all different types of psychics. You have like bone casters, tarot card readers, there's mind readers, there's also people who can dreamwalk and take possession of other people, and the setting of this book is very 1984-esque, which is another great dystopian. So we are in a super technological surveillance kind of city, but it's only slightly in the future, so it's not wholly unrealistic. It's kind of like if you were walking around London today but there were 10 times as many billboards. Think like Times Square in New York, and cameras absolutely everywhere, and the government is very tightly policing the population of the country. Now we follow Paige Mahoney, who is a psychic, and because psychics are so persecuted in this world, they have banded together in underground crime gangs where they can sort of hide out, be themselves. There's a lot of gang politics in here, which is really interesting, although that's not as present in the first book in this series. And one day Paige, I think she's on her way to see her father, and there is an altercation that happens on the train where she uses her psychic abilities, and because of that she's hunted down and captured by the government. Now everybody assumes that when you are captured by the government for having psychic abilities that you are executed, but that is not the case, and that's pretty much all I'm going to say, because what happens to her when she thinks she's going to be executed is one of the most shocking things that happened in this book to me. I definitely did not expect it, but I did go into this series pretty blind, so while it's not exactly a spoiler, I won't tell you where she goes. So this book is definitely set in a dystopian setting, however there are very strong science fiction elements in here, or maybe a supernatural presence. It's kind of still unclear to me, either that or I've forgotten what exactly this other presence is that happens in this series, but while it is set in a dystopian world there are definitely other genre elements going on in here. Now I really like the romance in this. The romance is kind of polarizing. Some people think it's problematic, and I definitely understand why they say that, but I really like the romance in this. I also really like the gang politics because they're kind of like family, but then they're also like crime lords, so there's that kind of loyalty to the gang but also fucking everybody else over to get what you want. I also really loved the setting of this and the paranormal, supernatural, science fiction element, whatever it is, like the mechanics of that was also really good. The one thing that I will say about this is that it is an adult book, and it is one of the ones that kind of throws you in at the deep end at the beginning. So when you start reading this book you will have no idea what is going on, because while this is a reasonably realistic world, there is definitely terminology that goes on in this world that we are not familiar with, but there is a glossary at the back, which I did not know when I read this. I read the entire thing and then I found out there was a glossary, and now I know why I was so confused. So this book is still in progress. There are 3 books released so far. It is going to be a 7-book series, and I believe that book 4 will be out next year. I'm eagerly awaiting it, and I'm really excited where Samantha Shannon takes this series, because in my experience of reading the first 3 books, every book kind of has a different theme, so I really want to see where book 4 is going to take us. Then we have Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. This was one of my favourite books of last year, and this is one that is set in a dystopian world, but is definitely more of a virtual reality sci-fi than a dystopian. So this book takes place in a futuristic world where humanity has kind of lost everything. It's kind of the path that we're heading on now, where we're high technology and have a complete disregard for nature. So essentially fossil fuels are impossible to come by, food is really hard to get hold of because we poisoned the earth, population is out of control, and essentially people live in these very highly populated areas. Once again, this is set in America. The country is an absolute wasteland, but like I said, we are in a high technology world, and so everybody has plugged into this virtual reality world called the Oasis to escape the reality of their everyday lives. Now, the creator of the Oasis, James Halliday, passed away quite a few years ago, and he left an Easter egg in the Oasis, and instead of leaving a will, he said whoever cracks the codes for the 3 Easter eggs will inherit all of his estate, control of the game, and pretty much everything that he ever owned, and his legacy. Now, James Halliday was a teenager in the 80s, so the setting of the actual Oasis, where we spend most of the time in this book, is an 80s paradise. There's lots of 80s references in here. I was born in the 90s, so I'm not old enough to remember all of them, but I did get quite a few of them. There's even references to a, I'm not going to say obscure, just not super popular 80s band, and I told my boyfriend about that and he really appreciated it. Like, I had no idea who they were, but he did. There's also references to things like 80s movies and games, which I really appreciated. The 80s is my personal favorite era. I kind of like the fashion and the music, so that was one aspect of this that I definitely loved. I'm also a gamer, so I really enjoy virtual reality sci-fi, so anything to do with the gaming aspects I really love. As well as that, the setting of the Oasis is kind of like an RPG, so you'll like grind for levels and go on quests, and I appreciated all talk of that was in this book because I could relate, because I'm definitely one of those gamers that spends ages like building XP instead of like following the storyline. As well as that, there's also some pretty fantastical scenes in here because everything in the Oasis is make-believe, so Ernest Cline could pretty much have done anything with this world, and he really went there with some aspects. It is a little bit info dumpy in parts, especially at the beginning. It kind of just like drops on you the entire life history of James Halliday, but as I find I'm really interested in dystopian worlds and kind of how we got from normal society to this dystopia, things like that in dystopians don't bother me too much. And the last book I'm going to talk to you about today definitely airs more on the side of young adult fantasy. That's definitely what I categorize it as when I talk about it regularly on my channel, but that is the Red Queen series by Victoria Aveyard. Once again, this takes place in a dystopian America, although this does have an aspect of alternate history in it as well. Now, this has a lot of science fiction and fantasy elements in it. The interesting thing about this is that it does read a little bit like a medieval fantasy, but the more you delve into the world, the more you find out that this is futuristic and not historical. So this takes place in dystopian America, like I said, and I believe, and this is what I've gleaned from things that Victoria Aveyard has said as opposed to the book itself, but somewhere around the time of the Roman Empire, something else happened as opposed to what happened historically, and people emerged with superpowers. Now, these people in the book are called the Silvers. They have all types of powers that depends on their family. It does seem to be very much genetically passed forward. Some of them can make plants and trees grow. Some of them manipulate water. The royal family manipulates fire. And there's also people who can read minds, people who can bend metals and things like that. But then you also have the rest of society that did not develop this sort of superpower gene, and they are the Reds. And the Reds are just normal citizens and they don't have any powers. They are very much oppressed. They are considered the lower class. The highest that they can ascend in the social hierarchy is to like a merchant that crafts things for the Silvers, and it's very much an imbalanced power dynamic within society. Our main character, Mare Barrow, discovers that she has the ability to manipulate lightning, and she discovers these powers in a very public setting, and the royal family find out about her. They take her into the palace and they try to pass her off as the daughter of a guy who died in the war quite a few years ago, so that they can hide that they may not be the elite after all, because people with red blood may also have power. Now, this one has the shakiest dystopian setting of all of the ones that I've mentioned so far. This deals a lot on implication and implied dystopia, but the thing that's really interesting about it is that it kind of of explores what would have happened to humanity if it had gone on a different path. So alternate history and dystopia kind of sometimes go hand in hand depending on where the evolution like of humanity and society evolves to. And it does have a lot more aspects of young adult fantasy than any other genre, but I personally really love this series. This is one of my favorite series, and it is quite polarizing. People say that it's very tropey, and it is. It was written in 2015. However, I don't really understand where those criticisms come from, because the time that this was published, all young adult fantasy was this tropey and had these tropes. It has the chosen one trope, it has a love triangle, it has somebody from poverty rising up through the ranks like in the Hunger Games and the Grisha series. So I don't know why so many people were against it, but if you do like a tropey young adult fantasy that has heavy romance aspect, is super angsty, has a chosen one with superpowers, I love the chosen one trope. I might actually do a recommendations video on the chosen one trope at some point, because I absolutely love that. I know a lot of people hate it nowadays, but it's still one of my favorite tropes. So if any of those things sound up your alley, I would recommend this series. The second book is a real low point, and I know a lot of people have quit at the second book, but I would urge you to push through because book 3 and book 4 are really good. Glass Sword just has some real second book syndrome. So that is it for my dystopian recommendations. Please let me know if you have read any of these, and please also recommend me some dystopians. When I was building the list for this video, I realized that I own a lot of dystopians that I really want to read. Like I said, I'm absolutely loving dystopians. I can't wait to pursue the Arc of a Scythe series. Book 3 has just been announced, so I'm excited to read book 2 soon and be ready for the toll. But that's it from me today. Please don't forget to like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you want to. If you head into my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish body butter and candle website, the Instagram for that, and a 10% off discount code. But that's it from me today. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you'll go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.